Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Writer's Realm podcast, and thanks for joining us on the epic adventure we call writing. We're your hosts,
Holly Robilliard.
Austin Matthews.
and Bob Adato. And today we're going to be talking about writing YA fantasy with Lennon K. Riley. Hi, Riley. I mean, Lennon.
You just
I will
introduced
answer
her.
to both. I did a creative writers workshop abroad where everyone spoke a different language and they could not get my name, so they just called me by my last name.
Okay.
So they could do. So I just started answering to it.
That's
It's
fair.
okay. A lot of people consider my first name Matthew, even though it is super not.
Yeah.
So I get it.
You have cute first names.
Yep.
Well, Lennon, great to have you. So you're a YA fantasy. What do you have? What are you working on?
Yeah, so I published my first debut novel on Amazon back in May. It's called
Nice.
The Last Heir of Excalibur. The short version is it's a female King Arthur, modern day retelling. So for anyone who likes King Arthur legends and Arthurian retellings, you'll definitely like this one. So Addie is a thief, kind of a rough and tumble, if you're into Disney, Aladdin character type from the rough side of the tracks, is stealing to survive. And she gets abducted by this guy who forces her to pull the sword out of the stone. And sounds really cool, but that comes with consequences, like all magic in my world. Now suddenly everyone wants to kill her and get the power of the sword.
Awesome.
So that story is about the little chaos and the adventures that ensue from there.
Yeah, definitely. And in between, she's got to get her homework done, or
She does not. So she
Nice.
has more fantastical problems than modern. So
Ah.
it's Camelot if it had continued to today.
Oh,
So her
okay.
problems are she has her own powers even before she pulls the sword out of the stone, and magic is forbidden in this world. It's illegal. So she has to hide her magic from the law while also having to use her powers in order to get by. So one of her wonderful gifts is that she can charm people into doing whatever she wants, like the Jedi mind trick from Star Wars.
Nice.
And she has to do it discreetly to not get caught, but this is how she's able to live and survive in this world, not having a home, not having money, being able to get through the magical black market of Camelot.
Yeah. Ooh, I just that right there. That's a hook.
Yeah.
The magical black market of Camelot. Wow. So that sounds very exciting. So you said your book is on Amazon. Is it available on Amazon or any other platforms?
It's available on Amazon and also barnesandnoble.com.
Okay. And then where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram and Threads. I do have a YouTube and a TikTok, but I'm not on it on either one of them. So
I
if you
get
want
it.
to actually talk to me, don't go to those platforms. Instagram
Okay.
and Threads.
That's okay. Yeah, we've been here about a year and there's not a whole lot of people. So that's okay. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I will promote the hell out of you.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. That's nice of you. Okay. Well, hey, YA fantasy. I don't think we've had a YA fantasy yet, have we? I can't think
I
of
don't
one.
think so.
No, I don't think so either. All right. Well, let's talk about YA fantasy because this is perfect, and I love your concept. Well, how did you come up with Camelot and Excalibur?
Yeah, I've always been drawn to the classics, but I like to turn them on their head. It's no secret, classics can be somewhat problematic, and they're also very different. Things have changed, we've progressed, we've grown, but there's still something about the classics that people really love and that we're really drawn to, and that still hold true. And so I took my love of different classics and put them into my book. So I love the Arthurian legends, but there was a lot about it that I was like, I would really love if this was different. So what I loved about it and what I kept in my story was I loved that with King Arthur's power with the sword and also his natural gifts, they never tell you. That's another thing I don't like about the classics is they will make these grandiose statements like he had this great ability, but they don't tell you what these things are. Uh, so I wanted to take that stuff, but add in the stuff that I would have liked to know, like what were his great abilities? How was he able to unite all of these countries that were warring? And how was he able to they call it charming. I turned into a magical thing. I think they actually just meant he was a charming guy. But he was so charming, he was able to unite all these armies underneath him. People just really genuinely liked King Arthur. And so I thought, wouldn't that be cool if that was a magical ability? What if he wasn't just a cool guy? What if there was
Mm.
something magical that drew people to him? And that's what ended these wars. So I gave Addie these abilities of being able to charm, heightened empathy, so she can feel other people's feelings. They said that King Arthur in the legends had this, great sensitivity for people. And I also gave her the abilities of, speed, endurance, these other things to make it make more sense for the world and adventures she has to do.
Hmm.
So I did my own stuff, but also taking from legends that I thought were really great that needed more detail. I also, at the end of the Arthurian legends, they say Arthur didn't have any children. Some say he had a son, but none of them talked about what would happen if he had a daughter. And so I also thought, like, what if the story continued? What if he had a daughter and his bloodline carried on? So that also is represented in here. Addie is descended from King Arthur.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's neat. Hey, you know what? I need to start with first. What is YA fantasy? Because no, I'm just being honest.
No, that's
Because
100% fair. Yeah.
because we
I was
have
just about to ask that.
yeah, because we have listeners that are just brand new to writing, and I remember reading this stuff and going, "What the heck is that?" And I actually had to, what's YA fantasy? So, what is for you, Lennon? What's YA fantasy?
Yeah, I think YA fantasy kind of combines young adult, so like teenagers, as well as new adult, which
Mm-hmm.
is sort of college age 18 to early 20s. My main character is 17 at the beginning of the book, so YA, because she's more towards the younger age range, the teenager age range.
Mm-hmm.
So YA, I think, is an age range of your main character and presumably your audience, even though we know older generations do read YA.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I've always heard talked about is that like while you could have an adult fantasy have like a young protagonist, you can't really have a YA fantasy with an adult or older protagonist. It's kind of like you don't want to read about something about somebody who's older than you. Generally it's I want to read about somebody who's my age or younger, and that's okay because I can relate to that a little bit easier. So
Yeah, the
a
content
14-year-old
also
doesn't want to read
matters
a
as well.
50-year-old. Yeah.
So an adult, you can have sex and also certain language. In mine, because it's YA, there is some swear words, but it's pretty light and no sex because of the age range.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. No. While we're on that, well, what else would make writing if someone wants to write YA, and so you just said no sex, a little bit of swearing. What else? What else would differentiate between? We got the age range. So what else would make a difference, or make it definitely? This is definitely YA.
Yeah, the conflicts, but I also think that has to do with age. So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of authors, particularly in the fantasy genre, love to write YA because the problems just are more interesting. That's when um, people are falling in love for the first time, is in that age and as a teenager. It's when we're coming of age because we're literally developing mentally and physically. So with a physical or mental emotional, development or change or that arc, or a problem like going to from one school to the next, or um, yeah, again, falling in love for the first time, or experiencing other firsts, those can present conflicts or problems that are fun to play with. And that's kind of your story built in there. Adults just have different problems, and some
Mm-hmm.
authors think that those problems are boring. They don't want to run them, which I totally
Yeah.
get as an adult. And some are able to make them more interesting. That's why there are
Mm-hmm.
tons of adult books out there. It really just depends on the author and what you want to play with. As an adult character, their problems are going to be more adult, but they also are going to be experienced differently. They're not doing these things for the first time. They have
Hmm.
had previous relationships, maybe even been married before. They've um, already come of age and kind of grown into their person. So maybe this is a new shift of an ideology or something they've, believed their whole life that is totally being turned on its head. It's just a whole new set of problems when you're an adult.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it. Is like you have very different themes when you're talking about like a YA versus an actual adult fantasy. So a lot of like, oh, like who am I? What do I want to be? Really defining themselves and like exploring the world, both through the story physically, but also metaphorically, trying to figure out where they fit in.
Nice.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's it's really interesting. I know I talk to a lot of people and they say, and I say this too, that we read so that we can escape the world that we're living in. But at the same time, we also read so that we can watch these characters experience things that we can relate to and that we know in the end these characters are okay. Unless you're in one of Austin's books, then you never know.
Yeah,
Um,
hey, you know
Same
what? You do
here.
know everybody dies, and it's just,
yeah.
mine are not escapes. They are places for you to go and process safely.
Yeah. But that's the thing is like when it comes to like a young adult novel, we want to like as adults, we can still relate to those characters because we've been there and we've lived through these
Hmm.
experiences. And so I think that makes a difference as well, is that being able to relate to those characters and they're experiencing things that a young adult would experience. Whereas if you are writing a young adult novel, you don't want to be talking about things that, a 35-year-old is going through, like a
Hmm.
divorce or, whatever, because young adults are not going to understand that. It's not going to seem very dramatic for them and it's not going to be very interesting. So having those relatable themes, I think, is a huge difference.
And I
Yeah.
Yeah.
think for some adults, even that might not be interesting. Some adults relate to it, or the emotions that come from reading a vivid description of what it's like to go through a divorce may be interesting to them. But some adults are like, why am I reading about them deciding what to do with the car or the second house? It's
Yeah.
a really important problem.
Yeah.
It just really depends on their interest. And yeah, so I think, but we've all been teenagers. Either we were right now, or, as adults, we can look back on it. So everyone can relate to that time.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Something interesting.
And I just think of, I mean, I think of going back in time all the time and how I would change stuff and how it would be so much more cooler than what it
Yeah.
was. Yeah, so
You know,
that's something I
to
would
that
love to
point,
do.
you know what? Harry Potter as a, YA fantasy had a time turner. They could go back and change everything, and they left it behind in what was that, book 3?
Yeah.
Never to use it
They
again.
just did it once, yeah.
I would have,
Yeah.
oh, you want to take it? No,
Also,
I'm going to use it, keep it for myself forever.
Yeah.
yeah, and the reason why it was used in the first place was so Hermione can go to more classes.
Yeah,
What a
that's-
lame reason to bring it in.
Excuse me, but fair point. I
Yeah.
would have loved it, Hermione. I'm gonna stand by Hermione on that one.
I love Hermione. She was my favorite from all the books. Like, Harry would have died like 12 times for her, but I'm
But
just
also,
saying,
Harry would have deserved it every single time
that's true.
because what a jerk.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that if Dumbledore came to me, if I were Hermione and I was 13 and he said, here's a time turner for you to get to all your classes, I'd be like, huh, I'm doing way more than that with this. That's not all I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, all sorts of things. Also, should have been rich because time turner.
So, what about the tone of the book? So, I think that for me, anyways, I feel like they should be a little bit more lighthearted, and the way that things are explained are a little bit maybe not as I don't want to say they're not as in depth, but they're not as detailed, maybe. Um, like they don't have to be
Hmm.
as put
Like
together,
graphic?
right? Yes. They don't have to be as graphic. You don't have to dive as deep into certain things.
Hmm.
And you can kind of just take the whole novel, although there are very dramatic things that happen, the whole overall tone can be a little bit more light, right? Because you're not diving in, like you're not using big words that people don't understand, and you're not trying to over explain and over describe things. And you're keeping things a little bit lighthearted. Like I always laugh, one of my favorite young adult novels, there's a line where she's like, "Oh, princes aren't supposed to be handsome," with like, an exclamation point. And it always makes me laugh because you can hear the voice of like an 18 or 19-year-old saying that, but you would never hear that in an adult novel because they just wouldn't say it like that. So I think that it's so important to keep that tone as well. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think emphasis on voice of the character, like you just said, is more brought out in YA than adult. And yeah, whereas some adult books will take like a paragraph to tell you about a character going from one room or one end of the room to the other and opening a door because it's being all like fluffy and beautiful language and lines. Young adult books are very much like, she went out the door. And that's it. We just
Mhm.
get you out the door. For mine, as speaking of like getting in depth with emotions and getting darker, actually mine do that because I don't think we should shield young adults from those
Mm.
emotions. And my content, my character is just darker naturally, so it felt right for the book. So she was an orphan, grew up in the foster system. She's from the rough side of the tracks, as we know in the beginning. So the story is very much about her finding family and her friends and making friends
Hmm.
and really finding that kind of love and lightheartedness and trust
Hmm.
that she doesn't have in the beginning. So the tone of my book is pretty dark. And also I'm one of those mean authors that likes to kill off characters.
Hey,
So
it's
Yeah,
not
that
mean to
guy.
kill off characters.
yeah, you and me, Austin. So that yeah, my tone of my books is very dark because I get into a lot of loss and what it feels like
Mhm. Yeah.
to lose things. The whole conflict of the book, actually, for the internal conflict, I've already gotten into the external conflict, but the internal conflict for Addie is she and the villain, the antagonist of the book, want the same thing. They both want the resurrection stone, and they actually want to use it for the same thing. And Addie's internal conflict is she wants to bring back her friend, her only friend from the foster system, who she believes she's responsible for her death. And so she wants to bring her friend back. She wants her friend back, but she also feels like she has to make things right. And so it already starts off like very dark. Like she has felt loss younger than most of us have ever felt. She lost her friend when she was 11. So we're coming into this 6 years later. She's 17. She's already been through what most of us wouldn't have been through by 17. So yeah, it already has a dark mood. And I just bring more loss into it to make her road a little harder. And I think YA can do that.
Yeah.
Fairly. It can be lighthearted, but I think delving into those emotions about what it means to feel loss and hardship when you're not prepared for hardship, when you're too young that you shouldn't be prepared or responsible for hardship, I think teaches kids a lot of really great lessons. I think that's why we're drawn to some of these shows that are on Netflix now, like Shameless and other shows where you see people going through a really hard time, but also kids going through a really hard
Mhm.
time. There's something kind of, I don't want to say heroic because that's not the right word, but there's something really cool about seeing people who rise to the occasion even when they're not really supposed to. You shouldn't have to be responsible
Mhm.
or rise to the occasion at 16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
There's something really cool to see that.
Yeah, and
Do
I
you
think one of those big distinctions is like I don't know that like you would get into those kind of themes or topics in a middle grade fantasy,
Mhm.
but like I think once you enter into like the YA realm, it gets a little bit safer to like, start exploring those things.
Mhm. I was going to say, do you feel like it's a common misconception for people with young adult novels that they don't think that the emotional development has to be as in-depth?
I think it's a misconception.
Mhm.
I think what doesn't need to be in depth and doesn't go in depth is, like I said earlier, I think the fluffy descriptions, the in adult novels, authors pay much more attention to the line. How beautiful is this line? Let me spend like 5 hours on this line.
Yeah.
Young adult authors don't need to do that. We just get to the point. And the voice needs to be stronger than just does this line sound beautiful and lyrical enough. But I do think the emotions and the character development do need to be in depth, and I think a YA does that really well. And I think they have a good ground, like a playing ground to mess with on that. Like I said, I think people are drawn to writing YA because that's when the most character development is happening. You're literally going from a child to a young adult.
Absolutely.
So that character arc and that character development is so easy. You have that good starter foundation, and then you know, you get to mess around with it. And
it's so crucial.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said because I remember, like you said, we're all that age, 15, 16, and most of us were trying desperately to be an adult. Like, we don't want to be the kid. We want to go out and party. We want to stay out past our bedtime. You know what I mean? We just want to be an adult. However, I think as an author, we can bring in this other stuff where, like, okay, you want an adult? Well, here it is, because this is this is the crap you're going to have to face. Right, and then you're like, "Well, no, actually, I don't want that now."
You
But
get
like,
to be
you're
the
stuck.
genie. You're like, oh, here's your wish.
The monkey's paw. It's the monkey's
responsibility
paw.
and challenges and literally the way of the world. I also think, being a child but also a teenager, and I think it's hardest when you're a teenager. As a child, you're still ignorant enough, you're okay with it. But as a teenager, you're very aware of how little power you have. Adults have power. Children, teenagers, we do not have power. They do not have power. So to write YA where you're literally giving the teenager the power and magic and power, that I think is what's really appealing to authors, but also to readers. I think that's why YA is so big.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting because a lot of us, we did it wrong, maybe. A few of us did it right. I remember hearing a real life story where a guy was like, I think he was 15 or 16. Dad left, mom was an alcoholic, and then she just up and left, and then she called him like 2 weeks later, hey, can you just take care of the kids? So this 16-year-old guy like raised these kids, like he wanted nothing to do with that, but like you got to do the best you can do, right? Yeah, that's very fun. I like that.
Yeah, and I think that brings up too like a really good point of like each section of fantasy as far as like age range that you're talking about. It's like there's different wishes that the story's kind of trying to fulfill, and so it's like when you're talking about YA, it's like the wish or the desire of a YA reader is going to be very different than like me as a 34-year-old man. Like I'm not going to want the same things I wanted whenever I was 14 or 15. I'm like, I just wanted to have control of my life. I wanted to mean something, make a difference or whatever. But like now I'm like, man, I just want to figure out how to pay bills, like how to get through my day. I want to figure out how to sleep more.
I want to figure out how to take a nap. Can I get everything done this afternoon so I can take a nap?
How to get everything done in one day. Again, time turner.
And that's why, YA sounds much, much better already because we don't want to read about a guy who needs to take a nap.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Adults have like really boring problems.
Yeah. We do.
I feel like I'm converting you adult authors now to be like, I should try one.
Well, let me go back a couple of steps because one thing I liked about how like you don't use flowery prose, it's not necessary. But is it necessary because of your readers, or that's just like the law of the land in YA? Like it's very simple. Like you write, I'm going to the river, and he went to the river, kind of a thing. Or why do you have to write like that?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the nature of YA. There are tons of YA writers that do write like that. I think YA gives you the permission to not. It's not required. And I had a second answer to your question, but I forgot the first part of your question.
Believe me, I don't even remember. Yeah, I don't remember even my name.
Yeah, I was like, I know you asked me 2 questions there, and I answered.
Oh, sorry.
I forgot your first one.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, it's one of those. I think you can get away with either side of the coin whenever you're talking about, how flowery your language should be, whether you're talking about YA or adult fantasy. So it's like you have very limited prose depth in things like Brandon Sanderson or some of those, like, or even just like there's some things that rely more on wit than on flowery language. When you get into things like the Discworld series, it's like it's not clever, like it's clever language, but it's not flowery. Mm-hmm. So you can do different things, I think, and it works at every level. So,
and that reminded me of what the second thing was. I was going to say is with IA, The emphasis is more on voice because YA is often written in the voice of the main character. Either it's going to be in first person or third person limited, which is where you want to still pretend that you're in the character's head. So I think that's another reason why there's not flowery prose, is because it just wouldn't make sense for a 17-year-old to think that way. And Addie certainly doesn't.
Yeah, that's
her voice is
100%
very
fair.
strong
Yeah.
in this. Yeah, she doesn't think in flowery prose, but also being from coming from the foster system, being on her own for so long, and also coming from very bad foster homes. There's history of abuse in this. She doesn't have flowery language. She swears. She speaks in like what is it when it's like a clipped sentence, you know, and not even full sentences. So kind of like the Hunger Games, how the Hunger Games is written, that kind of thing. She that's how she speaks, so that's how she thinks. And so I would write how she thinks so you guys can connect with her.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So main character is first person, and then do you have other chapters where it's other people, or you know, like you had the villain who also wants the stone? So is that also in first person, or you change that up to third person?
My whole book is written in third person limited on Addie.
Okay.
Yeah. In the second book, I'm working on the sequel now. This is going to be a trilogy. I am working with multiple POVs. They're all third person limited. And the reason why is because I hop around from POV to POV. I think it's confusing to go from first person to another POV. So, and I think that's really jarring for the reader. I don't like it when it's done to me as a reader, so I don't write that way. So it's all third person limited to make it easier for me to jump from character to character. And I'm working with 7 POVs right now. 5 of them are great as they are, but I'm in editing right now, and 2 I'm really struggling with. I don't know if I need to cut them, if they're just not doing enough, or if it's just that I need to be an author and do the work. The proper arcs of like an Act 1 and Act 2 and Act 3. Like I don't know if it's not doing right for the story, or I'm not doing right by the story. I'm still trying.
Yeah, it takes a lot of analysis whenever especially once you get into the high number of POVs. So I think my first published book had 8 POV characters. And so it's a lot of like, okay, let me like color code out a chart of like, how long has it been since I've been in this character? Like, where are they in their story? How does that line up with everybody else's story progression?
I got my color coded.
Nice.
Oh, there you go.
For the POVs, yep.
Okay.
See, but I'm an IT dork, so mine was all done on Excel.
No, I'm analog. I'm so old school.
Well, that's a good quick question about that, Lennon, because most of us here, well, all of us, are pantsers. So are you a pantser, or are you a plotter? Or
no, in fact, when you said pantser, I had a small panic attack. I don't know how any of you do it, especially you with your 8 POVs. Like, I don't know how you do this.
Well, see, you don't plan. You write the whole thing, and then you're like, "Oh, I've got to edit for 3 times longer than it took me to write the first one."
Yeah, also.
That's how you do it.
Like, I can just imagine the editing process be like, did I even add that in? And then you're like, oh crap, I have to add that. It was super important. Now this is just ruined my own story. So this is why I outline, because that gives me so much anxiety.
Even simple things, like I never gave a description for one of my POV characters through the entire book. I realized that after like the 3rd draft. Never told you their eye color, their hair color, anything. Like, I was like, oh,
wow.
Okay, yeah. I should probably do that at some point.
I will say, in my defense, I'm actually a combination of both, because I will plan everything out, like completely, fully plan every single thing out. But then the actual chapters, when I'm writing it, I know it's supposed to happen, but I don't know how it's going to happen, who's going to make it happen. And so that kind of gives my characters free reign. But going back to what you said about the structure and the 3 acts and the character arc, I love that you brought that up, because I feel like a lot of people out there are thinking, hey, I'm just going to write like a YA novel because I don't have to pay as much attention to my structure, and it doesn't have to be as, you know, like you don't have to necessarily have that. But I would like to point out that it does not matter what kind of book you are writing. You need to have some sort of that going on.
Yeah.
You need a beginning, middle, and an end. Yeah.
I would actually argue it's more important for YA.
I think another concern that people would think would happen was that only the main character needs an act 1, an act 2, an act 3, and beginning, middle, end. No,
Yes.
all POV characters do.
Yes, absolutely.
No, I'm sorry. Every single side character is just a cardboard cutout that I put there.
They don't even need descriptions. We don't need.
Who needs names?
They're not important.
They're gonna die.
I mean, that's just a fact
maybe
of life.
that's
Everybody
why
dies.
we kill them off, like subconsciously. Maybe that's why we kill off our characters, is because we're just like, we can't deal with this anymore. Let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
Main character, side character, who cares?
Uh-huh.
Holly was telling us she had written a character in like what the second chapter, and then by the end of the book, she was like, "Oh my god, I just completely forgot about that one."
I did. Yes, I
That
did.
happened to me actually in this book, so I ended up killing him off to explain his appearance. Like I had the villain do his little like mustache twirling thing of like, oh, I took care of him. But the critique group I was in was like, I loved him. Why did you kill him? And they were all devastated. So I brought him back. So you guys, if you read the book, you will never know who was killed off because he is not killed off in the
That's funny.
in the published version. But there's a character that's in chapter 1
That's great.
that I had to bring back to life.
Yeah.
Because my critique group was like, we loved him, bring him back.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
kill him.
Oh.
Yeah. Holly, was that in chapter like 2 of Heartbound, or
I
what
think
was
it was. I think it was like.
It was like 5 or 6.
Yeah, it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would have been chapter
Okay.
5 is when he appeared, and then I think he appeared like once more, like briefly, and then I was like at the end of the book, and I was like, hold on a second, something's missing here, and it was just that simple. And I was like, oh, should I go back and rework him in? And I was like, obviously not, because nothing else
Yeah.
has changed.
You got
So
through the
it's-
whole book without him.
Yeah, we don't need
Yeah, I'm like, so then
Yeah.
I was like, obviously, just the things that he contributed are easily something that somebody else could do, and so
Mhm.
it was just too easy to
So I'm
sweep
gonna
him
find
under
the
the rug.
book and I'm gonna read it, and then I'm gonna text you. Okay, which one was it?
Yeah.
Can we see him in there anymore? I'm gonna ask.
So I will say though, on the whole killing characters thing, I did find a way to have my cake and eat it too. So I still killed them off, but then I have a whole series that takes place in the underworld, so I can still have those people come back. And it's
They're all
like,
there.
oh yeah, we loved them, but it's like, oh well, now they're dead and they have new problems.
Nice.
Can't let go.
Mhm.
I must be cold-hearted because I just kill them off and I'm just fine.
That's
Yeah.
I'm just
Oh
fine.
well, see, I decided they needed worse fates, so you get to see them in hell suffering.
Death wasn't enough.
It's funny.
No.
Have you
going
noticed?
back to outlining? My process is a little bit type A, which tells you a lot about who I am as a person. So I start off with the 5 big ones: the like setup, the rising action, exposition, the climax, the low point, and the resolution. So I'll just make like 5 little bullet points in an actual notebook, not my notes app because I'm analog, and then I kind of spiderweb those out and expand it to like the beat sheet. So like the 27 beats or the 15 beats, depending on the story and what it needs. And then from there, I do a full chapter by chapter outline. So if you read the outline, you've actually read the book. Like you've seen everything that's going to happen. I'll have something like chapter 1, character A goes into the room, sits down with character B, they talk about this, and it's like a really long, like 12-page document. And just, from beginning to end, everything is all mapped out there. So that way, when I start drafting, I can just sit at my computer, just look at what's going on with that chapter and sit down and write. I'm not staring at a blank screen forever and hating myself.
That's really helpful, I think, too, especially for people. And this is not the case with everyone, because I'm not saying that pantsers don't have this going on for them, but it's just in a different way. But it's really helpful, I think, if you are planning on traditionally publishing, because most times when you're submitting your query letter, they're going to ask for a synopsis. And so they always say that before you write your book, if you have that synopsis, it's like literally the bare bones and like the full meat of your story. And if you have that, then the rest is going to be a lot easier, because those are the very important things that have to happen, and you're already like one step ahead of the game. So I think that's like a great like mindset to have, at least to figure those things out.
Okay, so I've got a question for you, Lennon. So you said like you write like kind of the outline of like here's what's going to happen in each chapter. Like how long are you writing? Like what's like a for one chapter? How long is that synopsis of what's going to happen?
It could be from a half a page to a full page.
Okay, because I was going to say like even as a pantser, like I have like a outline, but mine's like I don't know, like chapter 32. Put something in here that makes you feel bad for the antagonist. Like.
Yeah, I can't do that either. Because I need those questions answered. I know what would make them feel bad. Why would they feel bad? Why would they care about this person making them feel bad? Because we don't always feel the same about certain people. Like there are certain people that could insult me and I'd just be like, cool, dude. But some people, they could say like the barest little insult, like my house isn't clean. And I'd be like, that cuts so deep.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, so like that's the thing.
Really
Is like
depends.
I mean, I guess it's because I'm like to my very core a pantser. It's like I don't know. I don't know who that character is yet, so I don't know how to make you feel bad for them until I get there.
Yeah, that's too many unanswered questions for me, man. That would just give me a head attack. I would start questioning everything. What is writing? What is a book? Why am I doing this?
Why am I here?
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, good.
Have you noticed any trends, like any YA trends? I know like people say like, oh, it'll be like a wave of fairies and then a wave of this and a wave of this. Like, is there anything that you're seeing on the rise right now, or that's kind of just we're peaking on?
Romantasy. That's taking over.
Yeah.
So,
That's
Sarah J. Maas kicked it off. Now Rebecca Yarros with her Fourth Wing series is deepening it. And there's several others, but romantasy right now is the hot thing because in romance, the subgenre of romantic comedies have taken off, but people still really love fantasy. So combining these two main interests of these readers, it's such a big trend right now.
So rom-com fantasy, is that what we're talking about?
Romantasy is, romantic fantasy. So it's fantasy, but the emphasis is on the romance. So instead of a chosen one plot like mine is, or a quest, the big plot, the whole the conflict in the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 is centered on this couple.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice much ado about nothing in a fantasy world.
Yeah, romance set in a fantasy backdrop, basically.
Nice. So romance is perfectly fine with YA.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
But
falling
what's
in love.
included might be a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to
The
wait.
spice
So-
level.
Young adult romance would have like, first love, first date, some kissing maybe, but no sex. Adult romance, you can have more adult content.
Yeah.
I have seen it too, where there's been like scenes where like you can tell that sex has happened, but they don't say it's happened. It's like
Mhm.
like the next morning she's like, oh, he didn't stay the night, or like something like it's implied, but it's not like addressed.
Mhm.
I guess
Yeah.
it's not like so you don't see it on
And
page.
Yeah.
And this is in
It's
YA
like-
you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Wow.
YA,
Yeah.
it's okay to imply it or talk about
Okay.
it. Like,
Okay.
there's also YA where teenagers are talking about sex. Like,
Okay.
they'll
Mhm.
say, "You lost your virginity to your last boyfriend, right?" Like, it'll
Yeah.
come up in dialogue or something.
Yeah.
So we're aware that the kids, are having sex, but yeah, it
Right.
won't be shown on the page. No sex,
Okay.
no graphic.
So it'd be like in high school, but like you're in class. Like, Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Whatever you
We
can say
talked
in
about not
class. Say/do in class. You're good.
Yeah.
No, that's a great rule. Like, hey, like that's where it's at. Like, yeah. Like,
Now you can stab somebody through the heart,
Yeah.
but no sex.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in my book, there is violence. She does get into a lot of battles, does a lot of cool fighting. She's a very strong female lead, but can't have sex.
Right. Okay. So killing is okay. No, I mean,
Yeah,
no, all
murder
jokes
is
aside, YA killing says there's nothing wrong with violence. Probably not too graphic, I guess.
No.
Like it's stabbing, slashing kind of thing.
Yeah, my eldest
Yeah,
core
no, the
probably wouldn't.
violence in YA, especially in my book, isn't too graphic, for a couple reasons. One, I'm just not good at writing fight scenes, so I did the best with what I can do and with editing. And also, I don't really want to advocate violence against women, and I have a strong so I did what I could to still make it realistic for the adventure and, you know, the YA fantasy concept without wanting to talk about a girl getting the crap kicked out of her. I just didn't really want to do too much of that. So
yeah. Do you want to go over, Lennon, how you said writing a sequel is a little bit different than writing your first one?
Yeah. So I'm writing the sequel now. It's going through final edits. I'm joined a critique group that starts on Monday, and so it'll go through final edits through there, and it should be released on Amazon this summer. And I found it's a totally different experience writing a second book in a series than writing the first one series, but also writing a second book in general. So I've got like 2 different points. One, I actually wrote my first book back in 2020. It was not good, but it is now. I've written so many drafts of it. It's been through so much editing that I'm on the final now. I'm hoping I'm going to try and get it traditionally published, and if that doesn't work out, it'll be published on Amazon with my other books, so you all should find out what it is soon. But I really just wanted to write it as my 2020 pandemic project to just learn how to write a book. So I told myself it doesn't have to be good, and it wasn't. Just had to be done. So, and then this first one of the series was actually my second book that I wrote. And so those were very different experiences because I had the foundation and I knew how to write a book. I also knew what my process was. I'd finally gotten that type A outlining process all figured out. So that was what was different. But writing a second book in a series is so different from a first, with both challenges and some fun surprises that I did not realize. The fun part of it and stuff that was easier that I didn't anticipate is that because the world and the characters are already established, a lot of the beginning is me just kind of recapping for you, like what has happened in between book 1 and book 2. That was awesome. I was like, wow, I already have a whole chapter. And so far in present day of what's happened in book, not much has been happening. It's just a lot of Addie catching you guys up on what's been going on. So that was a pleasant surprise. But what I didn't realize was that also puts me in a box. It became really challenging because with the first one, whenever I got stuck, even with an outline, I still get stuck because with planning, as you said earlier, Holly, like you like to be prepared to be surprised. Your characters will take you to different places. With planning, I may have a place to go when I sit down to write, but my characters sometimes don't agree with the plan. So sometimes it just doesn't work out. There are challenges that I didn't anticipate when I planned it out. Like, oh, Addie wouldn't do that because of this, what happened in this foster home when she was a kid. So she, wouldn't trust enough to do that. Like, why would she agree to do this? But I still need her to get there. So things will kind of change. And in the first one, I could do that. I could do something totally like off the rails that you wouldn't know isn't like Addie because you guys didn't know her yet. And so I was establishing who she was for you. And as long as I made it believable, for the story, and as you were getting to know her, it totally works. But in book 2, now if I get stuck, I'm like, no, I can't do that because you guys would know that this isn't something that Addie would do, or this is something that these other characters would do, or this doesn't make sense for the world because I already had this rule about magic from the first book, so now I can't go back on that. So I'm kind of stuck in this box, and I have to work within the rules that I've already established.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because, like, as a pantser, like, I kind of face the opposite problem where I'm like, the first one, I got to make up everything on the spot. Like, I didn't have to have anything planned. So it's not like the second book's not convenient for me that I get to recap everything. I'm like, great, I have to remember everything I said before. I don't just get to make it up as I go.
Right.
But then it's like, whenever I'm looking at the characters, it's like, I don't care where they go. Like, that part's the easy part for me on the second book. I'm like, I know the character's going to do what the character does. And if everybody comes out happy and alive and married at the end, cool. If everybody dies, cool. It's a good story either way. Like, I don't care which Shakespeare play we're doing, comedy, tragedy, it's fine. But yeah, trying to remember all the things from the first book rough.
Yeah.
And that's why I have an outline. So
Yeah.
I kept my outline from the first book up as well to remind me of these things, especially since I did have to do recaps. I had to be like, oh yeah, we do remember the last time that this stone was seen. It was at the end of the first. I gotta talk about that and connect those dots.
So you have a like a character Bible, series Bible, so you can refer all your information back to.
Yes, I do. I have a series Bible, and the outlines are all within the same, OneDrive folder, so I can always go back as well.
Yes.
I will say that is something I've learned over the years of writing is super important. So it's like, as a planner, you probably have a lot of that built out beforehand. For all the pantsers out there, as you are writing, build it. It will save you so much time and frustration and headache. If you make a decision about something, just make a little note in your little series binder and be happy with it, because in the future you're going to thank yourself so much for not having to Control F through a million different documents to try and find how you describe something.
Yeah.
And readers do catch that. So I think the reason why I became such an avid outliner is I heard this horror story that still haunts me today. There's this author, pretty well known, and she does all right. And there was a book she wrote where her main character had a dog, and it was like always around her. It was like loyal to her. So it was like kind of a staple of this character, right? This dog just like follows her around everywhere. And suddenly the dog just disappeared in the second book. She had like left the dog in the car to go run into like the house or something, and then we just never see the dog ever again. The dog, I guess, is still sitting in this car to this day. Wow. And the readers caught that, so there's Amazon reviews of what happened to the dog. They're like 4 stars. We loved it. Yeah. But what happened to the
dog? Don't worry. There's a novella coming about just the dog.
Just the dog. Alien abduction. That's my theory. It was still sitting in the car. Alien abduction.
No kidding.
Quick Google. Does the dog die?
Yeah. What happens to the dog? Maybe it got out of the car, got hit by another car. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
It got bitten by a werewolf and it turns into like a human at the full moon now. It's a whole thing. Don't worry about it.
No.
But yeah, readers are unforgiving. They will catch that stuff and they will put that out there on reviews on the internet.
Yeah. I had a thing where I had a side character where it's like I offhandedly mentioned their name because they usually get referred to by their title, and then like went another 50 chapters without mentioning their name. And I was like, I don't think I've ever given this character a name. So I gave them a name twice in the same book. And I was like, well, thank goodness for beta readers, because they were like, hey, you already named this.
So it's like a Doug and Pat situation. He's both Doug and Pat, same guy.
It's a last name. Don't worry about it.
That's like happened to me with this book. So I have a Duke, and for a while I was just calling him Duke and then like his title name. And then I was like, with his close friends or like, family, they would and could call him by his first name. So I realized that like for dialogue with this relative, I'm like, I'm gonna have to give him a first name. Only mentioned it once and I totally forgot the guy's name. I had to go back. I just kept referring to him just to get through the draft as Duke, because I'm like, I can't remember his name.
And there's a really well-known author, and I can't talk about the book because it would be a spoiler for people who haven't read it yet. But she gives a character a magic power, and then at some point there's like something happens in the book and he just like pulls out a different power. And people a lot of people kind of like didn't really think anything about it, but as people started talking about this book and it became more popular, people were like, what the hell? Like clearly this is, and so I started laughing because I was like, now that's going to be the next book that comes out. It's like suddenly somehow she's going to redeem herself by being like, these ones actually have 2 powers, right? Yeah. Not just 1, but 2 powers. So I'm like, I'm waiting for it because I'm like, either this is like the best form of like the red herring that I've ever seen, where it's just like, so casual, or like, it was kind of a total like shit the bed moment, and now it's going to have to be like picked up somewhere else because, I think you hit that point, like that level of writing where if you're that well known, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I messed up.
Yeah.
Like,
No, see, it was a
Or you could
prestige
gaslight
situation.
people.
yeah,
Be
you
like,
gotta,
no,
you
there
gotta
was never
figure
a
it
first
out.
power. You guys are crazy. I don't know what I'm talking about.
No. See, it's a prestige situation. It was two twins living one life, and so they
Oh,
actually
brother.
each had their own power.
That's
Yeah.
right. We could do like an old classic soap opera style. It was the evil twin who had the other power.
Right.
See? Problem solved.
Easy peasy.
And then you get a love triangle out of it, which classic YA,
Or
perfect.
love square, because one could be in love with one twin, one's in love with the other twin, but they thought they were in love with that twin, but really they're in love with this twin.
No.
Mm.
Oh, I should write soaps. I should just quit this novel.
That's it.
Yeah.
business. I'm gonna write scripts for soaps.
Yeah, I mean, soaps are still a thing. I think that's what books are. You know, some books are
They can be.
just a long, just a
Wrestling
longer.
is.
Oh
Wrestling.
yeah,
I'm
wrestling's
not
the
a
best
fan,
trope.
but my husband has introduced me to the world of wrestling. It's
Yeah.
basically soap
Oh
opera.
man, the
I
drama
told him,
though,
I
for
think
sure.
17-year-old girls write this, or like 14-year-old girls. I'm like, I want them just to do a little skit of them showing the writer's room. It's just 14-year-old girls going, well, what if I had one where so this one's boyfriend? Because that was a storyline wrestling.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it's just a bunch of 14-year-old girls on the
Right.
writers.
That'd be funny. That'd be funny. Yeah. Well, all right. How about time for don'ts?
Let's do it.
Don't
Okay.
do this when writing YA fantasy. And Austin, we have to.
I've got one.
What?
I've got
Hold
one.
on, Austin. We have
I've
to.
got one.
I know you do, but everyone else has to go first. That's the rules for tonight.
The rules
No.
for tonight is I go last.
Nice guys finish last, Austin.
Yeah.
Well, then I go first because I'm not nice.
You're like, I'm not nice anymore.
His
All right.
characters would second that.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that for sure.
All right, Austin, what do you got?
I was just gonna say, like, I think there would probably be a temptation as adults writing YA to kind of dumb things down or to almost talk down to the audience, and I would say don't. Like, you're writing to mature people. They are full people. Even if they're young adults, they're still adult adjacent. And so like they can handle especially the emotional depth of things. Like you might have to handle it a little bit differently, but like they can handle the content, they can handle all of that stuff. And like I think as a young adult reader, I would have loved books that did that. I think that's why I stopped reading fiction for a really long time, was because I felt like a lot of the stuff that was written for my age group was talking down to me or just boring as all get out and didn't understand. And so like having that depth I think is super important.
Yeah, I like it. That's good. That's a good one. Who's
Yeah,
next?
I don't think that YA authors need to over-explain certain things. I think letting the reader interpret and have that emotional experience for themselves is just as relevant with YA than it is. For sure.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
I was gonna build off of that as well. It's basically the same thing, but
Yours was so
Wow.
good.
it was so
Ditto.
good.
Always ditto.
What
Go
he
ahead.
When you're doing it, just like you were saying, not talking down, but don't be preachy, right? Because we as adults we've experienced these things, and we have a tendency when we're explaining something to often be preachy or teach it to someone. And when you're writing, you have to make sure that you're actually letting those characters experience things instead of just teaching it to them. So I think because that's all part of the journey, and that's what readers will find relatable. So
yeah, I think that's something that's super important. So like whenever I used to teach, it's like you know what the answer is, but if you tell people what the answer is, it is meaningless to them. So you have to ask them the question and guide them so that they discover the answer for themselves. So yeah, like obfuscate just enough to where they feel like they discovered it. And they're like, oh, hey, this author didn't mean it, but like, look what I learned.
yeah.
All right. You have anything yet, Lennon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't fall on stereotypes and cliches, even with YA. I think it's really easy to fall into those, especially when you're just trying to get through the drafting, get through writing. But I think part of the great process of writing, but also what makes all novels good, but particularly with YA, is being able to get past that and really dive into that and do the work. A good example, when I was writing the first draft of this, I took a lot from the classics of, King Arthur to create the foundation, and didn't do enough to go away from that and create my own story. And one of the stereotypes that's in there is the bad guys are called the Black Knights, and that's pretty a racist stereotype. And so I, created my own culture and society of these knights that work as police and military, and stepped away from those stereotypes of black knights and white knights, the black hat and the white hat. Again, it could be so easy to fall in that, and I think we should extend some grace. I get it. It's super easy, but do the work and really try and get away from that and create something new and create something better.
Okay. I'm going to pick, mine is going to be super easy because we already talked about it.
Does that count? I'm not sure that.
Yeah. Guess.
I'm gonna be.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
You gotta come up with two.
Yeah. I'm gonna say don't. God. I can't even finish it. I'm such a dork. Don't forget about your characters that you wrote or their powers. So when you're writing, even if you're a pantser, and you like this guy, his name is Bill, and he's got the power to raise undead ducks, write that out and make sure you remember that Bill that he's gonna have a part in this story. Austin, calm down.
No, I'm sorry. You're just making me think of the movie Elf, where he's like, I don't care. Like, the kids don't care what happens to the stupid pigeon. Who cares about the missing pages?
Yeah. Yeah, we do care. We do care very, very much about our characters. So I know that was kind of a cheater because that wasn't a specific YA fantasy thing. But
yeah.
But guess what, guys? You already took care of it. No, you guys were amazing with that. I just added like a little detail that we can always, because all of us have done it. But I mean, all of us have admitted so it's a common thing. You write it out, and all of a sudden, so when you're writing out your characters, have a little, yeah.
We're sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying.
Yeah. We don't want the 1-star reviews. What happened to the dog in the car? So
yeah.
I'm just gonna add a dog in a car and never tell you what happened to it. It's gonna be like a slightly warm day where you're like, oh man, but the windows are cracked. I don't know.
He did it on purpose.
Horrible.
But you do bring up a good point, Bob. Like, arguably, young adult, the genre is, I would say, arguably more popular than a lot of other genres, and it's, I don't want to say more respected, but it is, because it is more popular, people pay more attention to it, I think. Yeah. And so you can't think that just because you're writing a novel for younger people that they're just going to be like, they're just not going to realize that you forgot a character, right? Whereas you might think, oh, like an adult would be paying more attention, or they would be more into the story or whatever. So, give them, the young adults, the respect that they're due, and take your dogs out of the car and keep your powers in check.
I think young adults might even be more hyper-focused, young adult readers, because they're not burdened down with the bills and the taxes and the, who's going to get the car washed and all that crap. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like,
all they care about is that dang dog.
Yeah, their care. Yeah, like this is their world, right? I mean, if we open up this is how all readers should be. You open up the book and like, hey, I'm invested with these people.
Yep, they have excitement. They're they're here for the long haul.
Yeah, they're bigger fan bases, and they reread a lot because they like to binge watch their shows and rewatch, and that carries over into their reading habits.
Well, and they don't have, not all of them have jobs in order to just go keep buying more books.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, yeah. See, so I came up with something really good. So
there you go.
There you go.
I will also say I do kill off the pets and stuff too. Like I do.
Austin, calm down.
Hey, in my first,
that's great.
In my first book, I did have one of the young characters. It was like a 11-year-old that like accidentally killed the neighbor's cat. So it was a whole thing.
All right. There you go. Hey. Another romance comedy by Austin.
Another romance by Austin.
I mean, we have talked about it here on the podcast. The romantasy I am working on is named The Necromancer, so you can only expect terrible things.
Yeah.
Death and more death.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing, Lennon. I think there was something else we wanted to talk about. We didn't get to talk about, so we're gonna have to have you on again, especially if your book's coming out in the summer, maybe the second one.
Yeah, no, this was awesome. I had such a great time. I'll definitely come back.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Be back, yeah, quarterly if you need me. Whenever I release a book. But yeah, no, I'd love to come back on when I have a second book I can talk with you about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Great.
Hey, so how can we find you again?
I'm on Instagram at Lennon K Riley and Threads at Lennon K Riley.
Okay. And then your book's on Amazon. And
My book is on Amazon. It's called The Last Heir of Excalibur.
The Last Heir of Excalibur. It's going to be...
Vanna White show for you.
There you go. There you go.
And for anybody listening and not watching, it is air and not air.
Right.
Like HEIR.
Yeah, we actually, I think we have way more listeners on Spotify and Apple and all that than we do on YouTube. So
that's going to be my other don't for forever is whenever you're doing a book title, make sure you don't use anything that's a homophone for anything else. Because I did Deviant Rain for my first book, and man, the number of people who think it's like precipitation instead of ruling, it's like no.
Spooky
I'm sure
weather.
AI
like
picks that up too. That's my problem with any transcription or AI. It thinks it's last AIR of Excalibur. No,
it's the last airbender of Excalibur.
There you go. Okay. Well, Lennon, it was fantastic having you. Thank you very much. Now we know all about writing YA fantasy. So thanks very much for being here. So for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our channels and the links below so you don't miss any of our Writers Room content. We always love to hear from our listeners. So if you have a question or a topic, please get in touch with us or leave comments and or even better, send us cakes and brownies. We like.
Oh yeah, we should get a PO box for cakes and brownies.
Yeah, it would be stuffed
How
full.
old would they be when you finally get to them?
Yeah.
I find knew cake was coming, not very old.
Fair.
Yeah. Okay. Well, until then, next time we're gonna have Lennon on again, sometime in the future. But until then,
have a great night, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.